Did you know that you can use your cutting machine to score? That's right, I said it. You can score with your cutting machine. And today I've got 4 techniques to show you on how you can accomplish this. So that way it doesn't matter what machine you have, old, new, fancy, whatever. You are going to find at least 1 or maybe even 2 techniques that you can do with your cutting machine to make those crisp, beautiful score lines in your cardstock. So if you're not sure what I'm talking about, a score line is what we use to help fold our cards to make those nice crisp edges. So when you look at your cards like this, a lot of them, they fold at least at the top, or if it's side folding, this right here would be your score line to give you a nice crisp line to fold. And I've got 4 techniques for you today to show you how to do that. Before we jump in, I want to introduce myself. I'm Christy here at Crafty Christy's Creations, and this is where I help you master your silhouette. So let's jump in to technique numero uno, and that is using your embossing mat with your embossing tool. Now, this technique, you need either a Cameo 5, a Portrait 4, or the Curio 2. Those are the machines that are made to use the embossing mat and tool. I think they're kind of pulling them back from these newer machines. I haven't been able to find these embossing mats lately, but thankfully I scored one earlier so I can show you this technique because I'm sure they'll be coming back in stock at some point. So that way you can do this too. So let's jump into Silhouette Studio, get things set up, and then I'll show you how we're gonna do this. Okay, so here I am in Silhouette Studio, and I've already put on here the piece that's my cardstock. So what I have here is a 4 1/4 by 8.5 inch piece of cardstock, and you can see that is what I'm showing on my screen here. And then we are going to come over to our page setup. And then I just need to make sure I'm using all the right things. So I'm going to use my Cameo 5. I'm going to do an auto feed. I need to change my cutting mat. And you'll notice embossing mat really only shows up under the Curio 2. But we can still use that even though I'm using the Cameo 5. So I'll get that put on there. And then the media size, I'm just going to do auto. I'll put my own on there. And the other thing I have is I have clicked on this show cut border. So you'll notice that it's already going to tell me that you cannot cut that first little bit on your mat, that it needs to be over further. And what I like to do is start my cardstock at that 1 inch by 1 inch. You can see here the mat has little tick marks at about the inch and then the 1/2 inch line all the way around the edge. So that way I can tell, like, this is my 1 inch across, this is my 1 inch down area, and that's going to start things at the correct place. And then in order to do my score line, I'm going to come over to the line segment tool, and I'm going to hold down the shift key, and I'm just going to click and drag a straight line across my cardstock. And then I want this to be at that 2 inch mark. Now you can see I've got my rulers on, and they show up on the top and then down the side. But if that's not enough, you can also come over to your page setup and click show grid. I don't want to snap, I just want to show. And then now I have my grid lines there, and that makes it a little bit easier for me to make sure I'm going to get this right on cue at that 2 inch mark, and that's where I want this to be. Now that I'm done, I'm just going to turn that grid off. To me, it's just too busy. This is a personal preference, so I'm going to leave it like that. And then the other thing, we are ready here. We're going to come over to the sun panel, and normally we're using just our regular textured cardstock. I'm going to click and drag and select everything here, and I'm going to say no cut. And then I'm going to come over to carriage 2, and if I select that same regular material and I change that action, notice there's no action there's no, right now it doesn't have a tool detected. There's nothing for it to go on. So let's go to our silhouette and get things set up. Okay, so here I'm using my Cameo 5, and then I've got my embossing mat. And you'll notice that it looks just like it did on the screen. And I'm gonna use these tick marks here. So I'm just gonna try to line this up. The other thing is they comes with these clear pieces here that you can use to help hold your material onto your mat. I definitely find it easier to just kind of slip these on before you get things stuck down on your mat. Once it's stuck down on there, I find it a little bit difficult to add these. And what these pieces are going to do is just help hold your material onto the mat. Now this mat is like slightly sticky, but not like overly sticky. So again, here's my 1 inch and then my 1 inch. And if I wanted to get really specific, I could bring in a ruler or a straight edge to make sure that that is lined up. And then I'm just gonna line it up at the bottom here. It's gonna come all the way down, it seems. Oh, and these pieces fell off. I tell you, I have a hard time with these little holder pieces. I think I just need to practice with them a little bit more. When you're using large pieces of cardstock like this, they're not super necessary, but I think they are, you know, they're a bit helpful to hold stuff down. That one's just kind of under there. Sometimes you can just grab a corner, maybe. Okay, it's sort of on there. All right, that's good enough. So ignore the fact that I have my electrostatic mat here. We are not doing anything with it. I just have not disconnected it from my machine. And so right now I'm just using it as a platform. But the electrostatic mat is gonna stay here. I am just loading in my embossing mat. So my embossing mat is loaded in, and then I have my embossing tool. I am using the thicker one. It doesn't seem to matter, thin, thick. They will all make a nice score line. And then this goes into carriage 2. And it's got that metal piece on the back, so it will auto read. So now let's come back to Silhouette Studio. And now you can see it says that that embossing tool has been auto detected. It knows that it needs to emboss, but oh wait, there are no carriage 2 compatible embossing actions found at this time. So just like I've showed you before with the heat pens, you do need to create a custom material for your embossing. And luckily I have already gone to that trouble. And I'm just going to pull that up right now, and then I'm going to select just my score line, and I'm going to tell it to emboss. And you'll see that now that it has changed that line color to blue, and that's how you know it's going to be for carriage 2. It's now blue. I've got all my settings here. Everything looks good. Nothing's going to cut. We're only going to emboss that line. So now I'm going to come over to hit send. Again, it's going to remind you to do some things here, and then all you have to do next is hit send, and it's going to go over to our cutting machine, and it's going to emboss that score line for me. And that's all done. We can go ahead and unload. I can just pull that back. Pull these off of here. And I'm hoping that using this colored cardstock, it's a little bit easier for you to see that nice embossed line that's on there. And now I can easily use that score line to just fold that cardstock down right there on that line. And then you can use your bone folder, your finger, whatever you're doing here, your scraper tool to really just take that line and reinforce it some more. But that is number 1, using the embossing mat with the embossing tool to make our beautiful score line on our cardstock. So now let's talk about technique number 2. And we are once again going to be using our embossing tool, but this time we're just going to do it on our regular mat. So again, let's jump over to the machine and get things set up there. So this time I'm going to leave my embossing tool in there. I'm going to go ahead and turn on my electrostatic mat. Now, you do not have to have an electrostatic mat to do this. This will work just the same on your sticky mat if you don't have the electrostatic mat, but you do need to have the newer machines to use the embossing tool. I believe it will work in your Cameo 5, your Portrait, I think we're on 4, and your Curio 2. That's what these are made for. So again, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to line this up again on that 1 inch by 1 inch mark. That's just my favorite place to kind of line things up when I have mats that don't cut all the way to the edge. And I'm just going to give that a little bit of time. Now, if you're new to the electrostatic mat, you need to have everything nice and flat for things to work. So this little piece here where I did that score line is a little bit raised, and you can tell it's not stuck down as well. So what do you do about that? Well, I would make sure I had a flat piece, but I'm just gonna break some rules right now, and I'm just gonna make sure that that score line comes down a little bit further, so that way I'm not using this area. The other thing you can do is come in with your masking tape just like you would do on your sticky mat if it wasn't like overly sticky for you. And I can come in and then I can just throw some tape on here and hold down those edges because I'm being naughty and breaking the rules, okay? So that's gonna help hold that, but you'll notice every other part of this is held down really well. So that's good. I'm gonna go ahead and load this in. And now let's go back to Silhouette Studio. And here we've got to make some changes. So I'm going to come back to design. And now what I need to do is change my cutting mat. We are now using the electrostatic mat with my Cameo 5. Once again, there are no grid lines here to help me out. So I'm going to turn on my grid. And this time what I'm going to do, I'm going to use that same line and I'm just going to, Control+Z, grab the wrong piece. Let me see if I can grab that score line. There we go. And I'm going to bring it down. I want to give that some room. So I'm going to come down, I'm just using my arrow keys. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to do that same way. So if I was drawing this from scratch, I'd pull in that line segment tool, and now we're going to draw our score line just like that. And now we've got that on there. I like to turn that back off, come over to the sun panel. Again, we are going to carriage 2. So I want to make sure it's already been used in carriage 2, so you'll see it's still blue, showing that that's what we want to do. But again, if this was your first time in this project, you'd want to go through those same steps of making sure it's a no cut and we're just going to do our score. So once again, I am going to use my pre-made embossing material and then I've got the embossing tool detected. We're going to auto emboss. And now I'm just going to do it without the embossing mat and just do it on my regular electrostatic mat. And you'll see a little bit of difference of what that looks like. But let's go ahead and send this. I'm not making any changes to any of my settings. So we're just going to send this to our silhouette. And it's going to emboss that line for us. So now let's go ahead and unload. And let's take a look at that line. It's right here. It's definitely a little bit more difficult to see. I'm going to turn off the electricity. I'm going to carefully peel back my tape. But you can see here, I've got that beautiful score line. So again, I can just fold on that line, and then you can use your finger or your bone folder or your scraper tool to really press that line in much better. Now, typically I don't do those lines both directions. I usually want it to just fold one direction. But there is our score line, again, using the embossing tool, but this time without the embossing mat. So that made us a really nice score line there. I'm going to go ahead and stick this back on so that I can show you our next way to do this. And this time we're going to use something different. So now you can see it's going to lift here. Let's turn that electricity back on. And just to make sure everything's going to work well, I'm going to come down here and add some tape to this side now too. Okay, so that's two ways, both using our embossing tool, one with the embossing mat and one without the embossing mat. And since we're just doing score lines, you don't notice the difference so much. It was still easy to see that line. It was still easy to fold that line, and everything worked out great. But again, these are options that are only going to work with the newer machines that are capable of using that embossing tool. So now, what if you don't have one of these newer machines? I still have two more ways to show you how you can do score lines without having to have this new technology. So let's jump back into Silhouette Studio and let me show you what these ones look like. Okay, let's go back to design, and we are going to change our mat. Oh no, we're still using the electrostatic mat. My bad, excuse me. But this technique is going to work if you have your sticky mat. This is going to work on your older machines. And now what we're going to do, let me use my grid lines again, just so I can make sure I'm getting lines on a good area. And I'm going to pull that line down. Come on. I'm going to come down here, and you can see I have my snap to grid. So it's really just wants to snap it right there for me. So this is going to be our next one. Now what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to change that to a dashed line. So I'm going to come over here to my line segment tool, or my line style panel. Let's try that. And what I'm going to do is change the style, and I can do dashed lines. So I probably use this closer together dashes, and then you can do the rounded corners. But what this is going to do is give you really close together dash lines, but instead of using it as a score, you're actually going to cut these lines. So now we're done with carriage 2. So now what I'm going to do is, this looks like it is still selected, but now I'm going to say cut. And what that's going to do is it's going to cut these tiny little dashes into the cardstock, and that's going to give us our score line. So let's go ahead and load this into the machine. We've got everything set up here. I'm going to load it in. And then I'm just going to make sure that I like the settings I have, and then I'm going to hit send. And so now it's going to come over here using my auto blade, and it's going to cut those tiny dashed lines. And this is another way that you can do a scoring type of line because they're so close together, you're not gonna necessarily notice them so well. But if you don't wanna go to the trouble of doing multiple actions on one piece of cardstock, this is a great option for you. So now let's go ahead and unload. I'm gonna turn this off so I don't electrocute myself. Sometimes as you touch things with the electricity is still on, you get a little zinger zap, and I'm not really enjoying those. So let me just try to peel this up here. Okay, so this one might be a little bit difficult to see, but it just did those tiny little dash marks in there. And it's really like you can feel it a little bit, but it's not very noticeable. So now when I take that and I can fold on that line, it's gonna fold really nicely. I actually kind of like how that folds, and with this dash line, it's really easy. So now you can go back and you can look at these, and you can see they kind of leave your paper looking a little bit different. So this one's pretty crisp. This is the one with the embossing mat. This one here was embossing without the mat. And you can tell the paper's a little bit stressed. It's been stretched. You can see some of the layers are kind of coming up. And then this one here looks real crisp with just that nice light dash line. So that is option number 3, is changing that line style over to a dashed line and actually cutting it instead of scoring it. But then it gives you a nice crisp line for you to fold. And you saw how easy it was for me to do that folding. I didn't have to do a ton of burnishing to get that line really nice. So let's turn this back on. And now, what do you think so far? I mean, these are really great, right? So let's talk about our 4th and final way to do our score lines. And this is my favorite way. This is the way I've been doing score lines since I figured out how to do this many, many moons ago. So let me show you my favorite technique for doing score lines. And I think you're gonna like it too. So now let's go back to design. And I'm going to go ahead and change my line style back to a solid line. And we're gonna come back to the page setup, show me my grid. And now I'm just gonna move that line, whoops, come on, down some more. And for our final one, all I'm gonna do now is, again, I'm using that carriage one. We're gonna use our auto blade. So this is definitely a technique you can use with any machine. Doesn't have to even be an auto blade. If you're using that ratchet blade, you can still do this. So I've got my cardstock. I use the heavy 80-pound cardstock setting. And this is, I'm cutting Recollections cardstock right now. But you may have to adjust these settings a little bit depending on the thickness of your cardstock. But what I like to do is, now I'm going to tell that we're cutting this line, but actually we're not going to cut it. We're going to come down and we're going to change that action from cut to score. And you'll notice it took that blade depth from a 3 down to a 2. I like to turn it down even more. So I'm actually going to take that blade down to a 1. Now, if I'm using the ratchet blade, I would even turn that blade down to 0. And it just gave a super fine line. And that's my favorite. But with the auto blade, you can't go to 0 because then it doesn't feel like it's doing anything. So the lowest you can do is 1. I leave the force at 15, the speed, and I do really no other changes to that other than making that blade to a 1. So let's go ahead and load things in. Let me show you what this one looks like. So we've got everything set up here. We're still good and tacked down. We'll go ahead and load this in. I'm making no more changes. I'm just going to hit send. And then down at the bottom of our cardstock, you heard that blade go to a 1, and it's gonna just draw out that score line for us. Okay, so now let's unload, and I want to show you what this one looks like. And it might be difficult, again, to see this line here. It's very small. It's really very hard to notice until you go to fold your cardstock. So here is that final one right here, and it's just gonna fold over really nice. And then all you have to do is burnish that cardstock. Now I will say sometimes I do notice that things get a little cockeyed, so I do have to kind of pull that back where I want it and then burnish. And you have to be careful because you are still cutting, even though I'm cutting at a 1, you are still cutting in there all the way across. So if you fold this too many times, you do risk tearing. But that just makes such a sharp, crisp line that this is my favorite way. But I will say that I do really like this dash line, especially if you're doing something where you're not necessarily gonna notice. So like with my box cards that I do, this would totally work because I'm still putting covering panels over things that I'm not necessarily going to notice this. But if I'm doing this as a score line that's going to be like the top fold of my card, I tend to like something like this because it's a little bit easier. And what I love about these two options that we did with our cutting blade is that I don't have to pull out an extra mat. I don't have to pull out an extra tool. I can do it with the same equipment that I'm already using to cut out my cardstock. So those are my favorite two. So now you have to let me know which is your favorite way to make score lines. Now you have 4 different options to make score lines using your silhouette. And if you're ready to really test out your score line techniques, this mom box card that I have is going to be a great way for you to test that out. It's a box card, so you've got to make your corners just like how we just made 4 corners here. So you're going to do a lot of scoring with making that, and I think that's going to be a great project for you to use to find out which technique that you like for scoring the best.